Number 10. Batman laughs. There have been a few occurrences where the Joker has forced Bruce Wayne to laugh. One of the most memorable being at the end of The Killing Joke, where it's implied that Batman finally snaps, also in turn snapping the neck of the Joker, potentially. This story is only considered partially canon and is centered around the idea of one bad day being all it takes to turn someone evil and possibly drive them mad, derailing their whole life. Throughout the course of the story, we take a look back into the past of a possible Joker origin, with even Joker acknowledging this might not be his true origin, where the Joker succumbs to the pressures of needing to provide for his family while failing in his career as a stand-up comedian that caused him to get involved in the world of crime. Following one bad day wherein everything goes wrong after he gets cold feet and learns that he has lost his wife and his child before falling into a vat of chemicals, he is reborn as the Joker. Near the end of the story, Batman apprehends the Joker and finds himself laughing at one point at one of the Joker's jokes, before it is implied that he kills the villain, finally breaking. Either that, or they were just sharing a laugh perhaps. But either way you look at it, it seems like the Joker won here, with Batman potentially giving into his own rage, or just his own joy I guess in a way. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button. It really does help us out. Number 9. She-Hulk turns gray. After the death of Bruce Banner in Civil War II, Jen became enraged. And worse, she also was suppressing her emotions somewhat. This caused her to turn gray, also transforming and not even fully remembering everything when the more monstrous side of her emerged, experiencing blackouts as this new more muscular and angry Grey Hulk persona took over. This also likely had to do with the fact that not only was Bruce Banner, her cousin, dead upon her waking up from her coma, but she also had in effect been out for pretty much all of Civil War II, meaning that she was also helpless to interfere or stop it. That would be heartbreaking in a self-loathing kind of way, where you feel helpless and also like the death of someone that you held dear and just crazy events was your fault, because you're like, well, maybe if I had been awake I could have prevented that, but I was in a coma. Classic comics problem. Oh boy, I was in a coma, I'm sorry about that. Number 8. Spider-Man goes back to black. When Aunt May's life was in danger, Peter Parker turned to rage. Her being on death's door as a result of a hit gone wrong on him, executed by the Kingpin's men, caused him to don his black suit once more. Although not a symbiotic black suit, I don't believe. After doing so, Spider-Man decided to pay Kingpin a visit after learning that he was the one behind the hit. The hit had been on Spider-Man, Peter Parker, whose secret identity was known at the time, and Kingpin had executed it from behind bars, as he was currently in prison. Spider-Man wore his black suit to the confrontation, but chose to unmask, showing his face as he beat up Kingpin pretty badly. While the rage within him wasn't strong enough to motivate him to kill Kingpin, it was powerful enough to cause him to beat Kingpin to within an inch of his life, warning him that if Aunt May died, he would be back to finish the job.
Number 7. Daredevil. In 2003's Daredevil Volume 2 number 49, we get to see a side of Daredevil that we rarely get to see. Obviously, Matt Murdock has gone off the rails a few times and flipped out thanks to his bad temper, but man, this was different. In this issue, we see Bullseye show up at Matt's place after he's already killed Karen Page and Elektra, just to kill another one of his girlfriends, and upon his arrival, Matt immediately throws him out a window and begins the beatdown of a lifetime. He took so much joy from beating the villain and mocking the Bullseye tattoo on his forehead, and just to really bring home the rage and get his point across, Daredevil grabbed a rock from the ground and carved the bullseye into the villain's forehead, making it even more permanent than it already was by forever scarring it. It's not even the action that's so insane, because like I said, with Ant-Man, the loss of a loved one can really lead you to do some pretty crazy things, but it's his reaction afterward, just smiling ear to ear, biggest grin you've ever seen in your life. Give this issue a read for yourself to see how truly merciless DD can really be, because man, saying I was surprised is truly an understatement. Number 6. Cyclops. Scott Summers has always had trouble controlling his powers, that's no secret, but during the events of 2012's Avengers vs. X-Men, it only got worse. In this 12-issue storyline, we see the Phoenix Force get fragmented and inhabit 5 prominent characters in the X-Men universe: Cyclops, Emma Frost, Colossus, Magic, and Namor, and the whole storyline basically watches the Avengers and the X-Men do their best to take down the Phoenix Force. In issue 11, we saw a crazed Phoenix Force-powered Cyclops lose himself to his newfound thirst for power. The issue ended with a big showdown between Cyclops and his mentor, Professor Xavier. Xavier tried to convince his surrogate son to relinquish the powers and come back to the good side, but Cyclops resisted and instead embraced the full power of the Phoenix and killed Charles Xavier. This was such a shocking moment because Scott is normally so level-headed and controlled, and to see him so power-hungry and full of rage is a side of him I never thought we would see. It can be argued that it wasn't his fault since he wasn't the mastermind behind everything, but he is still the one who lost control and snapped, so he has to deal with what he did.
Number 5. Scarlet Witch. Poor Wanda. Like many heroes on our list here, her loss of control wasn't really all her fault. Wanda for years had issues with feeling unworthy of love, leaving her feeling undervalued and resulting in her constantly ending up in questionable romances and doing her best to please everyone around her. So when her so-called friends lashed out when Wanda created her and Vision's children, kind of warping reality to have and keep them, it pushed her past her breaking point. When Wanda had discovered that her children were taken from her, she became unstable and eventually she kinda snapped, resulting in the events of House of M. And even there, once again, she was trying to not just give herself a perfect world, but also give all of her friends, family, and her colleagues theirs too. And even then, it still wasn't enough. Now look, I'm not saying that she was completely justified in her actions, just that it's understandable that all this unresolved trauma resulted in M-Day when you consider how powerful the Scarlet Witch is. Unresolved trauma is a huge problem, especially in comic books. If you have some unresolved trauma, it's definitely gonna mess you up. Number 4. Sentry. Sentry is a hero who is known for being one of the most powerful and yet one of the most unstable around. He basically was losing it from pretty much day one. While Robert Reynolds invented a story where he was a voluntary test subject who was chosen to receive the Golden Sentry Serum, in reality, he was a drug addict looking for a fix who stumbled upon it while breaking into a lab one night. At this point, he was already struggling mentally, and so when he became the Sentry, he also became the Void, with his heroic persona also suffering from his dissociative identity disorder. It was also implied that Mastermind made this worse or potentially unleashed this whole thing, but the reality is Robert Reynolds had struggled since the beginning, so it's more likely that Mastermind simply made things just even worse when it came to Bob's dissociative identity disorder, his DID. While the Sentry is supposed to be one of the greatest and most powerful heroes ever in Marvel Comics, the Void is supposed to be just the opposite, one of the worst and most deadly villains to have ever existed. Number 3. Superman. In Injustice, Superman completely snapped when he was faced with the fact that he'd killed Lois Lane and their unborn child together. Now, this was not his fault, mind you, as he was being manipulated into thinking that Lois was Doomsday, so he lost it. He killed Joker and decided that the world needed a more severe kind of justice. A justice that would not allow any crime to continue, even if it meant taking control of the entire world in order to do so, which was pretty much what Supes did, along with his own loyal version of the Justice League, of course. This did create a big split amongst those heroes, as some felt Superman was in the right, while others thought taking people's freedoms away, no matter the reason, was never really worth it. And I kinda gotta agree with those other heroes. Number 2. Raven. I mean, Raven has to work constantly to keep herself from losing control of her powers and herself. Raven's emotions can cause her to completely lose control and turn to the dark side, both when it comes to her powers and her own inner self. One of my favorite points to come back to for levels of evilness and losing it for Raven is the Nightwing and Starfire New Titans wedding issue, issue number 100, for those interested in checking that out. Not only does evil Raven crash Dick and Corey's wedding and threaten Starfire, which is already a lot, I gotta admit, but she also sets up just how awful this is going to go right from the start when she arrives and immediately incinerates the priest. Yikes. Talk about an entrance. It's actually impressive to me that after the number of times Raven has turned super duper evil, she still manages to return to the side of heroism time and time again, and find a level of forgiveness from her peers. I mean, I feel like I've done a lot of bad stuff, but I don't know if I have anything on Raven. I know it's not really her fault most times, but she's done a lot of really bad things. Number 1. Phoenix. Jean Grey has lost control on a few occasions, but one of the most memorable is likely when she went from Phoenix to Dark Phoenix. Now, of course, in retrospect, this wasn't really Jean, but more an imprint and kind of adopted version of her used by the Phoenix Force. But still, it was made from Jean and likely represents what Jean would have done in that same position. So we can still kinda call it Jean. Comics are confusing. Phoenix ended up losing herself to the dark side after her interaction with the Hellfire Club. Interactions there caused Phoenix to snap, breaking through any mental barriers that were still holding on in her brain and causing her to give into her dark side as the power overwhelmed her. One of the first actions was to make Mastermind lose his own mind when she allowed him to see just how much power she was dealing with on a psionic level, giving him a little taste of what she experienced and the information that she had instant access to, which overwhelmed him, rendering him catatonic. From there, it only got a lot more crazy, and it would end up with Dark Phoenix destroying a star and the surrounding planets, one of which was inhabited by, well, millions of people.
Starting us off at number 10 is Batgirl. Now, this one has a bit of a heartwarming message at the end, but before we get there, one of the most famous stories in all of the DC universe is The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore in 1988. In this story, Barbara Gordon as Batgirl squares off against the infamous Joker and shockingly gets shot in the pelvis. Luckily, this bullet didn't kill Batgirl, but it did unfortunately render her as a paraplegic and end her Batgirl career for the rest of her life. Now, even though it was a loss as Batgirl, it was a new beginning for Barbara Gordon as Oracle. Thanks to the writers Kim Yale and John Ostrander, instead of axing the character of Barbara Gordon, they went ahead and made her a new kind of superhero. A superhero who works from her desk constantly, helping the world's heroes through a worldwide communications network. So, once again, it's a loss as Batgirl, but a huge win for Barbara Gordon as Oracle and the rest of the DC universe. A true example that humans of all abilities can be superheroes. So, maybe it's not a loss after all, I just really wanted to share that inspiring bit of comic book history. But now, let's really get to the losses. At number 9, we have Miss Marvel. One of the longest rivalries of all time in comic book history is between Rogue and Miss Marvel. In the crazy packed issue of Avengers Annual number 11 written by Chris Claremont, we see the first appearance of X-Men's Rogue and the return of Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel after a controversial year-long absence after she gave birth to a child who was later revealed as the villain Marcus Immortus in Avengers number 200. At the end of the book, writers sent Miss Marvel back to Marcus's home dimension with him, and the Avengers let her go. Not being a huge fan of that choice, Chris Claremont wrote Miss Marvel back in as a mysterious blonde woman who almost fell to her death off of the Golden Gate Bridge until she was rescued by Spider-Woman. It was then revealed that this mysterious woman was actually Carol Danvers, and that in a previous fierce fight against Mystique's adopted daughter Rogue, Danvers temporarily had all of her powers stolen, thus giving Rogue not only all her Miss Marvel's powers, but memories too. Spider-Woman then took Carol back to Professor X, hoping that he would be able to use his telepathic powers to unlock Carol's memories, but alas, only was able to unlock some of them. Even the ones she did get back, she lost the emotional connection to. Now that's a huge loss. At number 8, we have one of the many Green Lanterns, Guy Gardner. Back when Green Lantern Abin Sur crashed his ship off the coast of California, there was a 50-50 chance the ring would choose Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner. Hal just happened to be a bit closer to the crash site at the time. Eventually, Guy did get his ring though and kept most of his crime fighting on Earth, while Hal was off in the cosmos fighting otherworldly threats and all things like that. Guy was known to be a bit of a jerk though, and a bit of a hothead. Many people, because of his demeanor, often didn't think of Guy as a real Green Lantern. So after a while of getting teased and not willing to take any more of the pestering, Guy challenged Hal to an all-out battle in Gerard Jones's Guy Gardner Reborn number 1. What was the award? The winner would become the official Green Lantern of Sector 2814. Guy was the loser and had to give up his ring and say goodbye to the Green Lantern Corps, and even though he wouldn't admit it, this gutted him. The Green Lantern Corps gave Guy purpose and drive. Guy ultimately lost it all. That being said, a little bit later he was back in business after stealing the yellow ring off a dead Sinestro's finger and put his newfound powers right back to good use. He might have been a bit of a jerk, but he still sounds like a good guy to me. Get it?
Number 7, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is thousands of years old and is the sister of Genesis, who is the wife of Apocalypse. She is a hardened warrior who respects power and strength like the other mutants of Arakko, and her powers reflect this. Iska's power is psychokinesis, which is the power over luck and probability. But specifically, her power means that she cannot lose, or the better way to say it is that she always wins. This includes one-on-one contests, votes, and wagers, but also larger battles where she is a member of a team or army. In contests of skill, her power, including some limited shapeshifting, gives her the talents she needs to win, or she might just win through improbable circumstances. So far it sounds pretty good. Always winning is so good it just sounds like ridiculous and lazy writing. But it also means that in larger battles or wars, her powers weigh the probability of the two sides and make her defect from the losing side and join the winning side, even if the losing side was composed of those she truly cared about. Meaning that even though she still technically won, she betrayed her closest friends and allies. So she has a great power, but no control at all on how it manifests. Number 6. Black Bolt. Blackagar Boltigan made his first appearance in Fantastic Four number 45. He is the Inhuman King, who when exposed to the mutagenic Terrigen Mist was granted power of an incredible level, even for an Inhuman. His power comes from his voice, with even the smallest whisper being capable of rocking a battleship. This power was discovered when he was just a baby, and in order to protect his community, he was kept away from society until he was 19, in order for him to try and learn to control his powers. When finally let into society, he saw a Kree warship, which he brought down with his voice. Unfortunately, the ship landed on the local government officials, including his parents, and he accidentally became the leader of the Inhumans at age 20. He is really good at not speaking now, as he knows all too well how little control he has over his powers and their effects on others. Number 5. Radioactive Man. Not to be confused with the Simpsons superhero whose goggles do nothing, or with the DC Comics villain, we are talking about the Marvel hero known as Radioactive Man. Making his debut in Journey into Mystery number 3 in 1963, Chen Lu is a nuclear physicist who exposed himself to small amounts of radiation at a time until he was able to build up a powerful immunity to it, as well as the ability to manipulate it to his benefit. However, he is unable to stop being radioactive, and therefore he can't be around anyone without giving them radiation sickness. He's able to mitigate this to an extent with the use of a containment suit, but this only works for a limited amount of time. This was a constant issue for the character, but later issues later retconned his abilities so he was able to have greater control of his powers, allowing him to not give all of his friends cancer. Number 4. Rogue. Anna Marie first appeared in Avengers Annual number 10. She was raised in a hippie commune in Mississippi with her close friend Cody Robbins. One day, Cody decided that it was time to shoot his shot with Anna Marie. Proving that the whole "the worst she could do is say no" thing is a bit inaccurate, when Cody and Anna made direct skin contact, her mutant powers drained him of his life force, leaving him in a permanent coma. She eventually found a way to make this power work for good when she joined the X-Men, and she got more powers once she made contact with Carol Danvers. But overall, Rogue is unable to control her draining powers and is forced to wear gloves at all times in order to avoid making direct contact with anyone who she could accidentally hurt. Number 3. Friendly Fire. Friendly Fire is a member of Section 8 who has the ability to shoot powerful energy blasts out of his hands that deal devastating damage. Unfortunately, as his name suggests, he is totally incapable of hitting what he is aiming at, and instead always ends up hitting his teammates. This has led to a couple of deaths of Section 8 members, but the worst death has got to be the one that occurred when the team went up against the mini-angled ones. These strange visitors attacked the team, easily dispatching team members like Jean de Baton and Dog Welder. Friendly Fire realized that it was up to him, and he had to come through for his friends. As he put it, "I gotta do it. Just this once. Gotta hit what I'm aiming at. Can't let my buddies down. Must hold the power." He unleashed the full force of his blast and blew his own head off, barely being able to utter the word crap before dying. Number 2. Infectious Lass. First appearing in Superboy number 201, Drura Sept from the planet Somatur is part of an alien race whose bodies play host to a variety of different microorganisms. The people of her planet are able to play host to these bacteria without suffering any ill effects, but they were able to infect the people around her. This sounds like it could have some potential for a superhero power, the ability to unleash germ warfare on your enemies. But unfortunately, Infectious Lass is unable to control who she infects, and is just as likely to infect any of her allies as she is her enemies. She tried out for the Legion of Superheroes, but was denied membership as she was deemed more of a risk to the Legion members than an asset. Number 1. The Hulk. When Bruce Banner was accidentally caught in the blast radius of his experimental gamma bomb, he underwent a startling metamorphosis. Whenever he becomes angry or outraged, he transforms into the Hulk. The Hulk is of course a giant green rage monster who is prone to going on rampages and smashing things. Hulk is viewed as a monster by society, and by extension, so is Banner. Banner has to make constant efforts to control the beast within, but since it would be a boring comic if the Hulk never came out, Bruce constantly loses control and unleashes the Incredible Hulk onto the world.
Number 10, the Plutonian. If you're familiar with the Irredeemable series, then you will likely already know why I put it so low on the list today, but if you're not, that's no worries. This entire storyline is about the Plutonian, the supposed strongest hero ever to exist, and is all about a superhero snapping and losing control. Very little is known about the Plutonian, even by the people who are supposed to be very close with him, but he draws a lot of parallels with Superman, as he has a Fortress of Solitude-like hideout in a volcano, and not to mention his powers are basically the same with a few more sprinkled in there for fun. Mark Waid, the writer, argues that not all superheroes are mentally equipped to deal with the power and responsibility of being a superhero, so it's bound to happen that one would lose it and just go completely mental. This story follows the Plutonian as he slaughters the people of Earth and all of his former friends, family, and allies. The comic evolves into making the Plutonian a supervillain, or at least shows him in the early stages of it. He's a hero on the edge of losing complete control, and it does a great job of showing how others are meant to deal with the mess that he creates. I highly recommend you check out Boom Studios' Irredeemable series. It has a total of 37 issues, and it really is a great read. Number 9, Green Lantern. The specific Green Lantern that I'll be talking about is Hal Jordan after his home was destroyed in 1992 to 1993's Death of Superman's storyline. At one point during the story, Coast City was destroyed by Mongol, and Hal was not very happy about that, to say the least. To try and resurrect the city back to its former glory, Hal attempts to use the power of his Green Lantern ring, but its power is revoked before he can make it permanent. Consumed by grief and anger, he ends up becoming the villain Parallax and goes on a mass killing spree, killing almost all of the other Green Lanterns so he could take their rings and absorb their power. It ended up getting to the point where Hal was so powerful that he was one of the most feared superheroes in the galaxy, and to date this is considered to be one of the most strongest iterations of the character. And even though it's not really his fault since he was under the control of Parallax, you'd still think that his strong will would at least have tried to resist the temptation, but alas, that wasn't the case. Why not give this story a read for yourself so you can see just how strong Hal became by starting with 1992's Superman, The Man of Steel, Volume 1, number 18. Number 8. Ant-Man. The specific series that I'll be talking about for Ant-Man is the Ultimatum series that ran in 2016, and yes, I know that it's not considered canon by many people, but we're not talking canon, we're talking about losing control, and that's exactly what happened to Ant-Man in this twisted storyline. Within the first 5 pages of the first issue, everything goes terribly wrong as out of nowhere the sky darkens and all of Manhattan is flooded, and many of our heroes are submerged underwater. Some are lucky enough to resurface, but unfortunately Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, drowned and Hank was unable to find her no matter how hard he tried. Following the tidal wave and in the second issue after the water had cleared, we see the entire city of Manhattan in shambles and overrun with criminals doing their thing, and this is exactly when we see Ant-Man and Hawkeye come across the villain the Blob as he's feasting on Janet's body. This obviously did not sit well with Hank, so standing at about 60 stories tall as Giant Man, he just picks up the Blob, states that he is not going to play around with him, and then straight up just bites his head off and spits it out on the ground. The loss of a loved one can really push people to do some crazy things, and apparently it can push a hero to the point of murder. Check out this storyline for yourself, or feel free to skip ahead to issue 3, where this gruesome scene takes place.
Number 7. Red Hood gives Batman an ultimatum. Red Hood kind of had every reason to be mad, considering that he basically died and was kind of forgotten. But he wasn't mad that Batman never came looking for him. He wasn't mad that Batman couldn't save him. What he was really frustrated with was the fact that Batman let the Joker live, despite the Joker seemingly killing Jason. And honestly, I kinda get that. I mean, the Joker is a criminal who has killed lots of people, and in essence also killed one of Batman's adopted sons, Jason, a kid who trusted him, who was his partner, who was his Robin. And even after that, Batman still refused to take any finite action against the Joker. Red Hood responded by giving Batman an ultimatum. Either Batman lets him kill the Joker, or Batman rights his own wrong and kills the Joker himself. And if he refuses to let the Joker die, he would then have to kill Jason. Batman, of course, opted for the fourth option, typical Batman making his own options, stopping Red Hood by knocking the gun out of his hand and letting the Joker live. Not the option Jason had been hoping he would choose, I imagine. Number 6. Psylocke refuses judgment. And I mean, fair enough. I feel like Kwannon has been through enough throughout the years. She shouldn't have to deal with the Celestial taking Mr. Sinister's side and judging her endlessly, calling her a bad mother. That's pretty rude considering all she's been through. Woman is doing her best out here. This all went down in the therapy session issue of the current Marauders series, which was their AXE Judgment Day tie-in. What I liked the most about this issue was that it focused more on the processing of the idea of judgment, as opposed to what the result of the judgment was. It wasn't about how you were judged, it was kind of more about like how you felt about being judged and what that meant for you. And obviously, Psylocke felt a lot of rage, as, you know, she perhaps understandably should, considering the fact that the progenitor chose to come to her wearing Sinister's face. And then critiqued her pretty heavily. I would also be pretty pissed, I gotta say.
Number 5. New 52 Superman. We all know our Prime Earth's Clark Kent. So let's take a look at another version of the superhero that didn't stick around for too long. Now, possessing many of the same powers, there are many things that led to this demise of this version of Superman. One being the use of a new power he dubbed the Solar Flare. This power released a massive blast from his body, using every last bit of solar energy stored in his cells. The devastating power alone made this ability a very useful one, but it left Clark powerless for 24 hours after each use, because his body needed time to reabsorb the sunlight. After repeated use, Superman found himself less and less super, losing his powers one by one. Fast forward past a few fights and a pretty bad kryptonite infection, and we find Superman needing to use this ability one last time, and it really was the last. Our new 52 Superman is finished off for good, and if it weren't for the pre-new 52 Superman finding his way to this universe, there would have been no one to protect it. Check out the storyline for yourself and let me know in the comments what you think. Number 4. Raven. In the comics, Raven's powers weren't always clearly defined, and neither was her control over them, which is why we'll be focusing on the Raven that we saw in 2003's Teen Titans TV series. Born the daughter of the demon Trigon and the human Orella, Raven was primarily raised by monks and was taught to use her powers and abilities, as well as learn to keep her emotions in check. Now, upon learning that one day she would be used as a key element in her father's eventual takeover of the universe, she ends up fleeing to Earth, hoping to escape the fate where she eventually joins the Teen Titans. In the cartoon, it's clearly stated that her powers are dependent on her emotions, so the reason she acts so cold is to keep her abilities in check. But despite her attempts, Raven is still human, well, half human, I guess, and her emotions get the better of her a few times in the series. In the episode Fear itself, when, after watching a scary movie, Raven's fears were manifested as a real beast that haunted the Titans' towers, and in the episode Switched, we learn of the connection between Raven's powers and her emotions when Starfire, in Raven's body, causes havoc in her chaotic emotions. Now, it really makes sense why Raven meditated so much throughout the series, and man, do I miss that show. If you haven't watched it, please do yourself a favor and find it on the internet. You will not regret it. Number 3. Friendly Fire. Now, little is known about this DC Comics character, other than that he's not the best hero. With the ability to shoot blasts of fire and energy from his hands, you'd think that he would have learned to aim early on, but alas, he seemed to have skipped that step. He was a terrible shot, so he consistently hit his friends and not the villains, making the name Friendly Fire make sense. Once a member of the hero team Section 8, which was basically a big old group of losers. I mean, come on, their members consisted of a guy who carried around a window to throw at people, and another guy who welded dead dogs to villains. He kind of looked like a superstar compared to those guys. His final adventure was probably the worst out of all of them, because instead of hitting the villain with his powers, he ends up blowing his own head. Check out this tragic yet hilarious story for yourself in 1997's Hitman number 18. Number 2. Franklin Richards. Known as Powerhouse, Franklin Richards is the son of Reed and Susan Richards, and We've all learned by now, being the child of two mutants usually leads to some crazy strong powers that are impossible to control. Considered an Omega level mutant, Richards possesses a ridiculous number of powers, which earned him the title of the most powerful mutant ever born. Because Franklin's powers manifested at a young age rather than during puberty, as with most mutants, his control over his abilities wasn't always that great. In fact, Franklin once defeated Ultron when he accidentally released a wave of psionic energy as a result of Ultron's radiation. He also once resurrected Galactus, created a villain known as Modulus when he felt jealous of his newborn sister, and even transformed Ben Grimm back into the Thing to rescue him from an Asgardian warrior. This kid is truly not someone you want to mess with. Why not check out his story for yourself through his first appearance in 1968's Fantastic Four Annual number 6. And number 1. So many of the X-Men. Now, this one had to be combined into one point because my goodness, there are so many X-Men who have trouble controlling their powers. Here, let me give you a few examples. Cyclops can't control his optic blast without the help of his specifically made visor. Beast keeps mutating into various furry forms. Wolverine's lost his healing factor countless times and has even died because of it. If Rogue touches anyone, she involuntarily takes their powers and even their lives if the connection isn't prolonged. Meryl once lost the ability to control her excessive bone growth. Hot-headed Chamber has basically no lower jaw or much of a neck thanks to the energy blasts that emanate from his head, and Legion barely has any control over any of his abilities. Now, obviously this all makes sense since the nature of a mutation would obviously have its drawbacks, but seriously, when you list it all like this, it seems a little bit excessive.
Number 10, Batman. Ooh, one of my favorite heroes out there, especially right now. Despite Batman claiming to always be so in control, even he has his limits. We've seen countless realities and Elseworlds where Batman completely loses control and even becomes some of the most powerful and unstoppable villains we've ever seen in DC's history. And we got a lot of unstoppable villains. But when it comes to Batman, one of the biggest villains I can think of for him is Batman Who Laughs. Batman is a villain who loves to prepare for any potential crisis, but often it is this obsession that ends up being his downfall. And even in the main continuity, there are a few times that Bruce has teetered near the edge of losing it. Also in the Batman Telltale game, granted at least that loss of control, well, it wasn't really his fault. Number 9, Cersei. Cersei is a member of the Eternals, who admittedly have all flown off the handle before at some point. But in Cersei's case, this has happened more than once. Cersei at one point suffered from an eternal illness known as Mad Worry. Mad Worry? Mad Worry? That sounds weird, but I'm just gonna assume I'm saying it right. Which appeared to make her more aggressive, even pushing her to, at times, kill her opponents. Her change in demeanor was also denoted in the comics via a change in costume. I love a good costume change, with her wearing a bright red number in place of her more common green superhero attire. I mean, I feel like red or green, either way you do it, I love both those colors personally. In order to help cure Cersei, who refused to acknowledge her illness and initially resisted the help of her friends, they decided to place her in Gan Josin with the Black Knight, forging a soul bond between the two, which would go on to basically cause a series of other awkward problems, as Black Knight and Crystal were more in love at the time than Black Knight and Cersei. And later on, there would end up being an alternate version of Dane Whitman, aka Black Knight, hell-bent on killing every version of Cersei across the multiverse. But hey, that's a story for another time. And all you nerds out there, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, The Flash. In the comics, Barry has lost it a few times, usually as a result of Eobard Thawne, Professor Zoom, manipulating him. One of the earliest examples of this in Barry's history was when Thawne attempted to do harm to Barry's fiancée on the day of their wedding. This also happened after Thawne had already killed Iris West, who is Barry's one true love. Fearing for his fiancée Fiona's life and not willing to lose another romantic partner again, can't blame him, after what happened to Iris, Barry shouted, "Not again!" and snapped Thawne's neck. As a result of this excessive use of force, Barry actually ended up losing his fiancée Fiona anyways and was put on trial. It all worked out in the end though, as he managed to escape to the future where Iris was waiting for him. And I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, I thought you said Iris was dead, so how could she be alive in the future? Well, this is The Flash, so time travel and such, and I don't know, maybe clones, it is comics. Look, it doesn't matter anyways because this happy ending also was interrupted shortly thereafter by Crisis. All of our happy endings got interrupted by Crisis. Woo! Number 7, Storm. Now granted, this one wasn't really Storm's fault, or her intention, but was more something that happened as a result of people preying on Storm's intense claustrophobia, or at least her past claustrophobia, as I think Storm actually managed to move past those fears in recent years, and she no longer really is affected by them in the same way. However, at that time, Storm was severely claustrophobic, so when she ended up being encased in a sort of skin-tight chrome casing, she lost it. I mean, I would lose it too if someone put me in a chrome casing. Doesn't sound very comfortable. Storm appeared to threaten the world over with a massive storm while under duress. The X-Men managed to eventually get through to her and calm her down, which was fortunate as her power levels at the time were compared to the Phoenix. That's how scary Storm losing it can be. That's how scary Storm can be in general. Not a hero you want to push past the brink or, piss off. Just respect Storm. I think that's fair. I think we can all respect Storm, yeah? Number 6, The Flash. Again, but the other Flash. You know what I mean. Wally West is known for being one of the most powerful heroes out there as the Flash. Honestly, I have always felt that super speed is right up there with one of the best power sets. I would agree with Amanda on that. He's also known for being one of the best heroes out there when it comes to his capacity for goodness. All around, Wally is just a lovable dude, but that doesn't mean that he is immune to the pressures sometimes inflicted upon our favorite heroes. Wally himself experienced a loss of control over his speed powers and his emotions during his time at Sanctuary. Basically a safe haven for heroes to go and talk about their feelings. Basically allowing them to do therapy in a safe environment. But it wasn't really open to villains, unfortunately. I thought it was pretty unfortunate anyways. I feel like I should be included, I'm moving towards being a hero, right? Wally's paranoia, mainly caused by the reset of the New 52 continuity as he remembered the previous one, New Earth, resulted in him rifling through the files at the Sanctuary. Now this overloaded his mind with intense emotions and basically resulted in him losing control, killing tons of heroes who were present at the time accidentally. Wally attempted to make things right while initially hiding what he'd done, making Booster Gold and myself, Harley Quinn, seem like the likely suspects. But it wasn't us, we didn't do it. But eventually, Wally would also come clean. And this also all went down in Heroes in Crisis. So many crises. We really love our crises over at DC, don't we?
Number 5, Green Arrow. Another character who is usually pretty good at keeping his cool. However, in 2010's Justice League Cry for Justice storyline, his patience and control are pushed to their absolute limits, and needless to say, he did not deal with the pressure too well. This is all thanks to Prometheus, a villain determined to attack superheroes and hit them where it hurts the most. In this story, the Red Arrow had his arm completely ripped off, and then his daughter was crushed as part of Prometheus' plan. This really pissed off the Green Arrow, but he decided to let Prometheus go after he'd been captured, and it seemed like, for a time, that the Green Arrow had kept his emotions in check. But then the scene shifted to Prometheus' lair, and we saw that was not the case, even in the slightest. Prometheus heard a noise behind him, and when he turned to investigate, he saw that Green Arrow had come to pay him a little visit. After a very brief discussion, the Green Arrow shoots an arrow straight into Prometheus' forehead, sticking him to the wall and killing him, stating that Prometheus never knew that at his core, Green Arrow wasn't a hero. He was a hunter. Check this storyline out for yourself and let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I personally love Green Arrow, and I think this ruthless side of him is pretty freaking sweet. Number 4, Spider-Man. Back in Black, a great AC/DC song, but also a Spider-Man storyline that ran in 2007. After a sniper's bullet changes everything for Peter Parker and his life, he dons his infamous black costume once more. From then on, Spider-Man would stop at nothing to find the man who pulled the trigger and, even more important, the man who gave the order to kill. This is truly Spider-Man at his darkest hour. Now I realize that was probably a little bit vague, so I'll just tell you straight up. Aunt May is the one who was shot, and this caused Peter to go off the rails. He tracked down everyone involved with the shooting and found that it all led to the Kingpin. He found the Kingpin in prison and he beat the living daylights out of him. He beat him within an inch of his life and then promised to kill him if Aunt May was to actually die. After he beat him to a pulp and got Fisk really scared, Peter decided to let him live with the shame of being handily beaten by a guy half his size in front of literally everyone in prison. Certainly surprising that the joke-filled webhead could be so ruthless, but I don't know, can you really blame him? Give this storyline a read for yourself by checking out 2007's Amazing Spider-Man number 539 to 543.
Number 3, Professor X unleashes his dark side. Professor X is generally seen as an altruistic figure. He dreams dreams of a world where mutants and humans can coexist and live in harmony. At least, that's how we usually know him. But Professor X is also a man with his own secrets, and as such ends up burying deep down his darker side, which he often represses. Until one day, this dark side is released somewhat. This happens after Wolverine has the adamantium pulled from his skeleton by Magneto. The event was so traumatic for the professor that he could no longer allow Magneto to go on, and ended up simply flipping off the switch on his mind, basically making him brain dead. Number 2. Absolute Onslaught. This isn't where Professor X's story ends though. In fact, this is just the beginning for his darker side. You see, the thing about Professor X is he has a tendency to hide his darkness and lock away his secrets and more sinister instincts, and when he pulled the plug on Magneto's brain, he in essence actually kind of took Magneto's mind into himself. Magneto's consciousness awakens Professor X's own evil side, and the two merge together to create an even more terrifying psychic entity that combines both of their power sets. Onslaught. And Onslaught ends up being so filled with hate and rage that he threatens the existence of all the heroes of Earth. Number 1. Wonder Woman Grieves. In Wonder Woman Dead Earth, which is also set in an alternate reality, the mystery of what happened to the planet ends up being revealed through us going back in time to remember that it was actually Wonder Woman herself who destroyed it, in an interesting twist. The twist comes from the fact that Wonder Woman does not actually remember what happened initially and doesn't have any memories and is trying to solve this mystery. She later learns that she was actually the one to have condemned the planet after losing her mother Hippolyta and all of her sisters on the island of Themyscira, who were transformed into mutants after a nuclear strike on the island. This came as a result of the Amazons trying to insert themselves basically into global conflicts in order to maintain peace and prevent war. Needless to say, man's world did not take too kindly to this. Wonder Woman doesn't take too kindly to their response either, and when Superman actually tries to talk her down after this happens, she blames him for not helping her people, and unleashes an untold amount of strength, killing him with their fight decimating the Earth. It makes sense that superheroes have lots of rage to me, considering their lives, and also considering they may not always feel free to express their rage, so it gets suppressed, it gets bottled up, and that can obviously cause it to build up and explode. Hopefully you don't have this problem, and you can take a few minutes today to do some calm, meditative breathing to soothe your heart and your soul before you continue on.
Number 10. Gambit. Remy LeBeau is a powerful and popular member of the X-Men, with the ability to tap into an item's potential kinetic energy, making it a dangerous and explosive weapon. He often uses smaller items, like a deck of playing cards, which he will then throw at his enemies. The only real limit on these powers is that he needs to make direct skin contact with whatever item he's charging, hence the cool fingerless gloves, and the amount of time it takes him to charge the object, with larger objects taking longer. He also has the ability to hypnotically charm people, making them more likely to do what he wants. Before he was a member of the X-Men though, he was a master thief, but he found that he was having trouble controlling his powers, and was worried that he might potentially harm other people. This caused him to seek out the help of Mr. Sinister, who gave Gambit a surgery, removing part of his brain in order to dampen his powers and make them more manageable. Number 9. Captain Atom. Captain Atom was originally a Charlton Comics character, the same way that the Blue Beetle used to be. DC Comics eventually purchased Charlton's collection of heroes, and as a result, he was introduced into the DC universe. In the DC retelling of his origin, Nathaniel Atom was a man sentenced to death for treason. He was offered the opportunity to instead sign up for an experiment designed to test the structural integrity of an alien metal. To test this, they placed Atom in a metal cage and then blasted it with a nuclear explosion. He was vaporized, but much like the Watchmen character he inspired, Dr. Manhattan, he was reformed with the metal now covering his skin. Captain Atom can tap into the quantum field and convert the energy into powerful blasts. He can also generate and manipulate matter, such as when he transformed Green Arrow's arrows into butterflies. Captain Atom has to be very careful with his powers though, as he is essentially a walking nuke. When he uses his upper power levels, he will start to leak radiation, and if his metal skin is ruptured, he risks detonating like an atomic bomb and destroying whatever city he's in. Number 8. Radius. Jared Corbo is a mutant who was raised with his half-brother Adrian in the East Ontario town of Orlew, at an orphanage called Hull House, or as the orphans nicknamed it, Hell House. Unbeknownst to most of the residents, Hull House was actually being operated by the Canadian superhero agency known as Department H, as a way to find and recruit members for their various superhero teams, such as Alpha Flight. Sometimes they waited until the orphans were of age, and sometimes they would have them adopted by the department so that they could participate while being underage. Which sounds bad, but when you think about it, isn't that different from what Professor X is doing. Jared's mutant powers allow him to create a force field, which he is incapable of shutting off. While this protects him from harm, it also means that he can't touch or be touched by others, and is even unable to effectively shower, and can't eat without wearing a special eating filter which converts the food to a form that can get through the field, allowing Jared to get the necessary nutrients he needs to survive.
Coming in at number 7 and staying with the Green Lanterns, we have Hal Jordan. That's right. What's the old saying? Payback's a bad thing? Yeah, you know how the saying goes. Unfortunately for Guy, he didn't get his revenge, but rather Hal Jordan was overpowered by other Alpha Green Lanterns. During the final Crisis story arc, Hal Jordan is awoken to a group of Alpha Lanterns accusing him for the murder of Orion and believing that he is under possession of the evil god's Apocalypse. After the testimony of Alpha Lantern Kraken in the final Crisis number 5, written by Grant Morrison, Hal is convicted for the crime and stripped of his ring and Green Lantern status, leaving him just another mere mortal. But don't worry, he gets his powers back because of course he would. He's Hal freaking Jordan. Bring us back to the Marvel Universe. At number 6, we have Quicksilver. In Brian Michael Bendis' 8-issue series titled House of M, Quicksilver is stripped of all of his mutant abilities, and funny enough, it's kind of by his own hand. The story begins by all of the mutants discussing the fate of Quicksilver's sister Wanda Maximoff because of her mental instability. Talks of destroying her are even brought up. But luckily for Wanda, Quicksilver wasn't about to have any of that. So, he took matters into his own hands. He immediately reported what was being talked about to Wanda, and then she used her reality warping powers to cause her entire reality to change. In this new reality, mutants reign supreme, with Magneto being in charge. Slowly realizing that this was a fake reality, and arguments erupted between Magneto and son Quicksilver, with Quicksilver lashing out at Magneto, telling him that he had to do what he had to do to save his sister, because those he trusted most were wanting to kill her. Enraged by her father's choice to choose mutants over his children, Wanda uttered the 3 fateful words that brought an end to it all. No more mutants. Thus dropping the mutant population from thousands down to just 198. Quicksilver not being one of them. Ouch. I guess that's what you get for trying to help out your sister. Moral of the story, kids, don't help out your siblings. Just kidding, I know my brother and parents are watching. Hi guys. Coming in at our halfway point is the ever so cool and almost invincible Wonder Woman. Back in 1969, Denny O'Neil took an awkward spin on the Wonder Woman comics, thinking he was being a progressive feminist, but in reality was just stripping Wonder Woman of all of her powers and duties. Along with master artist and storyteller Mike Sikowski, O'Neil wrote a storyline with Wonder Woman giving up her powers, lasso, and wicked cool costume to be an independent working woman as an undercover spy of the highest caliber. Doesn't sound like a terrible idea. For a bit, right? Well, reactions were a bit mixed at first, and then slowly became a bit more opposed, and then finally became strongly against it. Gloria Steinem, a huge icon and activist for the women's liberation movement, wrote an article for a magazine that stated the storyline was anti-feminist. It was believed to be anti-feminist due to the fact that she was stripped of her powers and was no longer stronger than man, as well as learning martial arts from a man as well. She became just another woman living in a man's world. As well, she was still fighting man's battles. Since then, O'Neil has gone on record and profusely apologized, saying that he thought he was helping the women's movement, but agrees now that he was far from. No matter what, to me, taking away a superhero's powers, no matter how the hero identifies, seems like a bad idea. Imagine taking away Superman's powers and reading about the life and stories of Clark Kent for the next decade. Boring. At our number 4 spot, we have the luscious Goldilocks super buff god of thunder himself, Thor. Our Lord and Savior Stan Lee, with the help of Larry Lieber, brought us all Journey into Mystery number 83 in August of 1962. Thor was known as an arrogant brawler who at most times was not able to put his ego aside. So, Odin, father of Thor, decided to send Thor off to planet Earth. What gives? When I was younger, I was sent to my room and couldn't leave. This guy gets the entire planet? What's he complaining about? Well, not only was he sent to Earth, he was also stripped of all of his powers as well as brainwashed to believe that he was actually Earthborn Donald Blake, a doctor from the United States. On a trip to Norway, Thor/Dr. Blake is attacked by aliens that started invading the area while he was on his trip. Dr. Thor then retreats into the hills and stumbles upon a hidden chamber in a hidden cave. Once there, a walking stick appears and he tries to use the stick to push a boulder in front of the doorway to hide from the aliens, which obviously doesn't work. He then smashes the cane on the boulder out of frustration, and the cane, with a flash of lightning, transforms into his famous hammer, as well as him, Dr. Blake, back into Thor, God of Thunder. This was how Odin needed to teach his son kindness and humility. But now it just makes me think that there's a possibility that I'm actually the God of Thunder too, and I just haven't had my moment yet. Anything? Okay, fine. Maybe it's one of you. Coming in at number 3 spot, we have the captain himself, Captain America. In Rick Remender's Captain America Volume 7, number 21, entitled The Iron Nail Part 5, we find Captain America square off with the not as popular but super dangerous villain, Ran Shen, aka the Iron Nail. This issue begins with Commander Duggan authorizing a laser attack on the Gungnir helicarrier, built by S.H.I.E.L.D., from a S.H.I.E.L.D. satellite while S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel are still on board. As Captain America and foe the Iron Nail continue their battle in pursuit of Captain finding out how to deactivate the Gungnir, Director Maria Hill tells him that he must destroy the core reactor. Cap continues and finally reaches the core with the Iron Nail right behind him. Just as the Gungnir destroys S.H.I.E.L.D. satellite, the Iron Nail stabs Cap with his tendrils and drains him of all of his super soldier serum, leaving Cap with no powers, as well as aging him back to his natural old man state. However, Cap does make one last final shield toss, destroying the reactor, and Sam Wilson comes to his rescue, defeating the Iron Nail and making an escape with the now elderly Steve Rogers. The good guys saved the day once again, but this time, Cap paid the ultimate price by losing everything that made him Captain America. Well, not everything, because after all, you can take his super soldier serum, but you can never take his heroic heart, nor his heroic soul. You make us all proud, and I salute you, Captain America, even as a Canadian. Coming in at our number 2 is the OG stud muffin himself, Superman. In Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, released in 1986, Supes is forced to fight the entirety of his rogues gallery, later finding out it was Mr. Mixie Spitlick behind it all along. Superman has one rule, and that's not to kill. Unfortunately, Supes is finally pushed to his ultimate limit and kills Mr. Mixie Spitlick. Supes feels beyond any type of guilt ever imagined and goes back to his Fortress of Solitude, where he enters a room filled with kryptonite. But not just any kind of kryptonite, gold kryptonite, which is a specific kind of kryptonite that can leave Superman absolutely powerless. Supes leaves his Fortress of Solitude after using the gold kryptonite on himself and returns to society just as a mortal man, feeling too guilty of finally abusing his power, at least in his own mind. This time he just felt like it was time to hang up the cape. Sorry Supes, how about I go buy you a beer and you let me try on your cape. Now, finally coming in at our number 1 spot, we leave the DC and Marvel universes entirely and go back to my favorite universe again. At our number 1 spot, we have Michelangelo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mikey, the party dude, the goofball, the ultra rad cool skater dude. Well, not anymore. Released in October of just last year, IDW Publishing, along with the OGs Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, and new guy Tom Waltz, was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin. This series opens up on one turtle in particular, wearing a black mask, bringing readers up to speed on how New York has changed in the last few decades. New York is now under the power of the Foot Clan, operated by Karai's son, Oroku Hiroto. Spoiler alert, but it is revealed in the end of this issue that Michelangelo is the last remaining turtle and is out to seek revenge on Hiroto for killing his brothers years ago. This story paints Mikey as a much older ninja who is not the goofy, party-going turtle he used to be. Later in the issue, after a failed attempt to take down the Oroku Hiroto, Mikey tries to commit the act of seppuku. There are currently 3 issues out of this storyline and 2 more set to release later this year, and I for one can't wait to read the rest of this one and see where it ends up. But one thing is for sure, our favorite shelled, cowabunga, screaming turtle lost everything. Or did he?
Number 10, the Hulk. Now Bruce Banner is the absolute poster child for not being able to control one's powers. If you're not familiar with the immense power this genius possesses, where have you been? Due to exposure to gamma radiation from the gamma bomb that he designed, he now has the ability to turn into the green giant known as the Hulk, with many of the early transformations being involuntary due to anger. Well, he does eventually strike an agreement with the beast within, an excellent example of that being the Hulk-Bruce hybrid we see on screen in Avengers Endgame, it wasn't always smooth sailing. Now, how much control Bruce winds up losing to the Hulk is best described as a spectrum, because there are times when he completely loses himself to the Hulk-fueled rage, there are times when he retains his genius intellect, and there are instances of everything in between, really. First appearing in The Incredible Hulk #1 all the way back in 1962, the Hulk is a staple in comic book history, and I really hope one day he just gets a decent standalone movie. Number 9. Black Bolt. Now, the king of the Inhumans is a bit of a tricky one, since he does have some control over his powers. He's just severely handicapped by them. Black Bolt's powers come from an organic brain implant that interacts with electrons in the air, and this implant is connected to the speech center of his brain. Now, similar to how Cyclops' powers is activated when he opens his eyes, Black Bolt's ability is activated whenever he speaks, no matter how loud he is, which leaves him effectively mute outside of battle. This has led to some major mishaps for the hero, like the time he accidentally killed his parents with the debris of a Kree ship he destroyed with his voice, or the time he fought Thanos and destroyed Attilan, which led to the release of a Terrigen mist bomb that, combined with the atmosphere, became deadly to mutants everywhere. So, although he does have control over his voice, that doesn't mean that he's able to control the sheer power of his abilities. Check him out in his first appearance, Fantastic Four #45 in 1965. Number 8. Citizen Steel. DC Comics' Nathan Haywood had a promising football career until a severe injury required him to have one of his legs amputated. Following an attack by the Fourth Reich, this was meant to wipe out the entire Haywood bloodline. Nathan was infected by the metal blood that came from one of those foes, and for reasons that were never really explained, Nathan's body absorbed the metal, and in addition to him growing back a new leg, it made him a superhuman. With his newfound super strength and invincibility, Haywood fights crime under the name Citizen Steel. However, there are aspects of his power that are completely out of his control. Because of his steel-like skin, he's completely lost the ability to feel physical touch, which prevents him from gauging temperature or pain, and he can't control how strong he is, and I mean at all. There are times where his footsteps will be so heavy and powerful that the floor will break underneath him. To try and counteract this, he wears a special suit that mitigates his movements, but it can really only do so much. First appearing in Justice Society of America Volume 3 #2 back in 2007, check him out to see how truly strong he can be. Number 7. Scarlet Witch. The twin sister of Pietro Maximoff, Wanda Maximoff has always had trouble keeping her powers under control. With the ability to manipulate and warp reality at will with a force she refers to as chaos magic, which was given to her by High Evolutionary's experimentation and then further amplified by the demon that was imprisoned in Wundagore Mountain, her powers are really easy to lose control of, especially when her emotions are out of control. A 2004 storyline is a great example of this when she discovered that her twin sons weren't real. They were actually just manifestations of her reality-altering chaos magic, and she was unable to accept this and soon became a danger to herself and others, so her memories of the boys were completely wiped from her memory. Years later, she began to remember them, and when she realized what had been done to her, she went completely mad with grief. Her nervous breakdown gave way to a full-on war waged against the Avengers that resulted in several deaths, and the team's complete upheaval, and all the destruction and death came from her tampering with the fabric of reality. Later on, she causes M-Day, the depowering of the mutant race that nearly caused their extinction. Moral of the story? You really don't want to get on her bad side because you have no idea what she's gonna do. Check her out for yourself on the big screen in all the Avengers movies, or in her first appearance, 1964's X-Men #4. Number 6. Ghost Rider. Don't worry, I won't be referencing the movies starring Nicolas Cage as Johnny Blaze, because if you sat through them like I did, I think you've suffered enough. Now, Ghost Rider's powers come from his black magic bond to the demon Zarathos, and he's always been a thorn in Johnny's side for decades. Thanks to this connection, Blaze gained the ability to transform into Ghost Rider, who possesses a vast array of powers ranging from hellfire manipulation to superhuman stamina. Similar to Bruce Banner, Blaze had very little influence on Rider's actions in the beginning, succumbing to Zarathos' control anytime evil presented itself. Over time, he gradually gained more control over his alter ego, using his powers to not only vanquish baddies, but to protect the innocent. Zarathos resurfaced several times over the years with various schemes to regain control of Johnny Blaze's physical body. At times, he's been successful, causing Blaze to once again lose himself to the Rider, but usually Blaze manages to come out on top and regain control. Take a look at his first appearance all the way back in 1972 in Marvel Spotlight #5.
Number 5. Cyclops Phoenix turns dark. This one happened during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. This conflict between the two superhero teams broke out over what the best course of action was in regards to the Phoenix Force, which had returned to Earth. The Avengers believed this was bad, whereas the X-Men believed it might actually not be that bad. could even potentially be good. Iron Man split the Phoenix Force into 5 pieces, and one attached itself to Cyclops. As the Phoenix Force began to rejoin together, with all of the Phoenix 5 becoming one again, eventually Cyclops was the last one with all the power. It corrupted him, turning him on Professor X, who attempted to talk him down. This was also a rough time for Charles, who was also seen as a more secretive, less idealistic figure after lies he told the X-Men had been revealed. The fight became so intense between them that it actually resulted in Cyclops killing the Professor. Number 4. Superman kills the Joker. Superman also once took revenge on the Joker, killing him dead. At least, he did in another reality. And this was a reality where initially it did seem like the Joker was basically asking, possibly even expecting for this to happen, as he forced Superman through manipulating his mind into hurting Lois Lane, killing her and any chance they had at a family together. Not only this, but Joker and Harley Quinn also worked together to destroy Metropolis, and I believe they also killed Jimmy, Superman's BFF. Superman tapping into his rage would be the beginning of the end for his time as a hero, and he quickly went from altruistic hero to ruling tyrant who used fear and violence to keep those underneath him in check.
Number 3. The Hulk. You always have to include the Hulk on any list that involved the hero losing control, because it's the Hulk, it's kind of his thing. In World War Hulk, the sequel to Planet Hulk, the Hulk is married to Kara, and they have a child on the way. After he's tricked by the Illuminati and sent into space with her, their spaceship exploded and she and the unborn child were unfortunately killed. Now, we all know that the Hulk has a very bad temper during the best of times, so you can only imagine what this tragedy did to him. I feel like I don't need to say it, but I will anyways. He went absolutely insane. He traveled from place to place, smashing everyone and everything in his path, and he single-handedly destroyed so many different superheroes that I won't even start to list them because I would be here for hours. Eventually his rage grows to such an extreme that the radiation threatens the entire Earth and he is taken down to save the planet. Even if you consider how grouchy the Hulk is and how often he loses it, this is entirely a different level for him. Give the story a read for yourself, starting with 2007's World War Hulk Prologue World Breaker Volume 1. Number 2. Wolverine. You probably know what I'm going to be talking about if you're a fan of the X-Men series when it comes to Wolverine. In the Wolverine Old Man Logan storyline, we get to see the vicious side of Wolverine that we have all come to know and love. However, this time it wasn't necessarily his fault. So basically it's the future and Logan is now an old man, and he hasn't used the Wolverine persona or his claws since this mysterious night in the past when a bunch of villains supposedly attacked. We learned through some flashbacks that a massive group of 40 supervillains attacked the X-Men mansion, and during this attack, Wolverine gets in touch with his primal side and goes absolutely crazy and kills every single one of them. After the fight and the intense slaughter, things change and Wolverine realizes it was all just an illusion. The entire time Wolverine had his vision and mind altered by Mysterio, and all the villains that he killed in combat were actually his fellow X-Men. This destroyed Logan and he decided to retire his Wolverine mantle after that, essentially killing that part of him so he would never do something like that again. It's definitely a very sad way to end a run as a hero, but I see why he felt that was necessary. Give this a read for yourself, starting with 2018's Old Man Logan Volume 1, Number 1, and while you're at it, why not rewatch the movie Logan and see if you can, draw any comparison. Number 1. Tara. If you're like me, then your first introduction to Tara was probably through the Teen Titans TV show, and man, I always remember thinking how cool of a character she was, and in the specific issue that I'm going to be talking about today, we get to see exactly how crazy strong she can be. The Dark Multiverse Teen Titans The Judas Contract reimagines one of the most renowned stories in comic book history, The Judas Contract. In this reimagining, Tara's betrayal starts with not the Teen Titans, but with Deathstroke himself. Now free from her mentor's influence and supercharged by the same serum that turned Slade Wilson into the world's deadliest man, Tara works to forge a new destiny written in the Teen Titans' blood. Now calling herself Gaia and viewing herself as a literal goddess, she changed her costume and attacked the Teen Titans Tower, killing Raven, Starfire, Wonder Girl, and Cyborg before battling against Robin and Kid Flash, who she was also able to overpower and kill. I could continue the list of who she killed, but again, we would be here forever, so I'll save you the trouble. She managed to destabilize the Earth's core, and from then on she forced every remaining being on Earth to bow down to her as a god. Pretty insane, right? Highly recommend you check this story out for yourself. Amanda McKnight and I have been talking about it ever since I started here, and we would love to hear your thoughts on it too. That'll be it for this video, everyone. There are a ton of other instances across all comic books where our beloved superheroes lose control, so let me know in the comments below some of your favorite times, and maybe we'll continue this list with a part 2 and cover them.